On. And we are recording on Saturday, December 20th, 2025 at 10:21. When there's too many 20s, I fuck up. Saturday, December 20th, 10:21 a.m., 2025, with Mr. Dominick Bruno, who's been on here before, and yeah, may or may not be joining us. I have no idea. But we were just talking about, like, well, I said before, and I was like, yeah, we'll just make it up. And then I kind of started rambling on like a crazy person about people who think it should be structured and glossy. And there absolutely no argument here. There absolutely is a value to like a glossy show. You got the big fucking whatever, desk and the background and the seamless cuts to stuff. And sure, there's absolutely a value for that. And I might just be, I don't know, like a prideful narcissist. But to me, it's always like if it's here's a better way to put it. I remember back in 2013, Grand Theft Auto 5 was announced, and everyone was like looking at the graphics, and my buddy was just like, "I hope it's good," but he was like, "The gameplay always comes before graphics." He's like, "That's why I still play Mario because it's just the funnest shit. It doesn't matter that it's on an N64. Like, it's fun." And I think that's kind of where I come in is like, it's the most glossy produced thing, and you listen to it, and it's nothing you haven't heard on 100 other channels about Trump's big move, and you're like, oh, yeah, and the AOC's stupid. Okay, yeah, I get it. Like Zelensky's the clickbait thumbnails. Zelensky's pissed now, and it's like you should. Where's the thing? They should be good no matter what. So I'll shut up. Donnie, your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, Tommy, you're not a narcissist because no narcissist ever says maybe I'm a narcissist,
Fair enough.
right? So yeah, it's
Maybe
so
I'm a
important.
very advanced narcissist.
Right, it's a super advanced narcissist.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, one of the ways to think about everything you just said falls under the idea of the iron law of oligarchy, which is the idea that any system, whether it's a company, a charity, a TV show, there will be the mission of the system, whatever the system is nominally supposed to do, produce a good show, take care of starving orphans, sell a product, whatever. And then there is the internal reality and politics of the organization. And when organizations start, they're relatively flat. So the leadership and the people on the ground, there aren't very many layers of bureaucracy between them. Energy and information can flow very easily from top to bottom. But as bureaucracy grows, and this is kind of an unfortunate side of being a victim of your own success, more and more and more layers start separating the people on the ground doing the job from the people making the decisions. And then it develops its own internal political structure. And the internal political structure starts being more important to the people in it than the mission. And so, who gets promoted within a big bureaucracy? The person doing the mission or the person who is really good at the internal politics of that system? And so you see that, absolutely everywhere. Like the American Red Cross, right? You think that the American Red Cross's job is to take care of orphans after floods and earthquakes, right? And they show up with donuts. Like, no, 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 no. The CEO of the American Red Cross flies around on a Gulf Stream. The American Red Cross owns blood.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so are there people in the American Red Cross who really want to take care of orphans after an earthquake? Yes, I'm sure that they exist, but they're not in charge. The people are in charge are the people who control the blood.
You want to know something fucked? My uncle, who I'm named after, my uncle Tom, and his father, my grandfather Tom, he's a doctor, Duke MD, fucking brilliant. And I got into the University of Miami Medical School in 2013, which is where he did his residency in like 1980. Because of its location, I guess, at the very tip, and it's responsible for 50% of organ transplants in the Western Hemisphere.
Whoa.
Just, I guess, the ones it's, I guess, from planes internationally, it's whatever. Um, and then he was also a higher up, like in the Red Cross out in, I think, San Diego in like the 90s. And so here's this guy, like, he's not me. He's not a fantastical conspiracy theorist. He's just a 4.0 freak of nature. And he told me after I got into University of Miami, He said, so he was in charge of the receiving. They have like quad helicopter landing spots on top of, whereas Portland Medical Center, it's a huge hospital in here in Portland that has one, right? So this one has four, and this was like 40 years ago. I don't even know what it has now. He said after his time being like the chief guy, the chief pathologist up there, he said take organ donor off your license. And if anyone else says that, I'm like, yeah, okay, kind of sounds Alex Jonesy, and this guy is not that guy. He said take it off. He goes, there is a from the way you can hear the pilots talking to everything about it, it is black and white when they know someone's an organ donor and when they're not.
Yeah.
I don't, man. Now he did the only brilliant thing and retired and left the country, but like, man, that's dark.
Dude, to quote Charlie Munger, you show me the incentive and I will tell you the outcome. Right. And so if there's an incentive, structure built, again, we don't look at the mission of the organization, think about the internal politics of it. Is there some type of bonus structure? Did Frank, the last helicopter pilot who really rushed to save that guy's life, did he not get that promotion? It's all of these subtle signals. It's in no one's mission
No,
statement.
no, no, not on a memo.
Yeah, not on a memo. There's no
Mm.
email about it, but gosh darn it, the people who really show up with a lot
You
of organs tend to do really well in this organization.
you don't think there's some off the books thing of
Could
hey
be.
of hey some hedge fund founder in your 70s, you got money out the ass. Yeah,
I think
maybe
there could be.
maybe if you build we'll just make up a billionaire's name, Bob Smith. Yeah, maybe for no reason, Bob Smith builds the Bob Smith oncology department, $500 million donation, and Bob Smith, no one knows, but he went to the front of the line for a new kidney.
Right?
That's probably how it works, man.
I'm certain that it happens, but I think that the worst part, the organ donor part you were talking about, I think that's just one of those binality of evil things
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah. No one,
it's
so many
just
hands. Yeah.
so many hands, and it's like, the middle manager just puts some subtle pressure. There's a joke at a Christmas party, and like you said, it's never in a memo, it's never in a mission statement, but everyone has figured out that within this organization, these behaviors are rewarded and these behaviors are punished.
I was gonna say let's play devil's advocate, and because it's no fun if we're both just agreeing on it, right? I always say that. Like, what's the same reason why like people are like you don't have on enough conservative people? I'm like, I am conservative. What am I gonna talk about? Do you like Trump's tariffs? Yes, I do too. Okay, let's jerk each other off, and that the show's over. Like, come on, man. So let's just play devil's advocate for the fuck of it. Let's take the ultimate shitty lawyer position and defend bureaucracy. Um, there probably is a value to it, and there's a program in the Cold War, I think called a blue, I think it was called like Blue Chicken or something, or Blue Rooster, and they had these mines, thermonuclear mines that were buried under a lot of Eastern Europe in case the Soviets ever got cute, and I guess because it was like the earlier models, they had to stay a certain level. They had to say a certain warmth for the all the external whatever working. And so what they did is they actually had these like caverns. It wasn't like a normal mine, like a foot underground. It was like 100 feet, which it doesn't matter when it's a megaton. And they would fill these things with like hay and chicken feed, and
To
they just let
decompose,
what?
decompose for heat,
No,
like compost.
no. And they filled it with chickens and roosters.
Oh my God. Okay.
And it was just enough that I think they had like a pipe for clean oxygen. So these chickens, it was probably just the most horrific conditions ever, but they were just fucking and creating babies, and just it kept these things warm for years in
Oh my.
case we ever needed it. And so like, but let's just look at it from a tactical point of view. No morals, no ethics, right? If that's your job and your job is to, you know, if your job is to maximize the capability of your military against the other one, there's something to be said for, you and I wouldn't look, we could look at that and say, see, there's there's a lack of efficiency. It's a, the bureaucracy's taking care of itself. Or you could say, yeah, man, here are all these nukes out of there, and now we don't have to use valuable personnel to man them. We can just leave chickens and their self-interest is fucking and eating. And like, is there something to be said about getting a corporation so big that you get to cruising altitude and now you go, I know it's a bureaucratic hellhole, but it's self-sustaining. The chickens just want to keep eating. Yes, could it be more efficient? Sure. You can build a nuclear missile silo like we have in the United States. Those are highly trained dudes. They're down there 90 days at a time. They're versus if you're just trying to like spread some nukes around, yeah, you might almost take advantage of inefficiency.
So I think we have to distinguish between, maybe what EM would call like artificial status hierarchies and natural status hierarchies, because it's real easy to kind of like look at a structure and get them confused. And an example I love for this, so my dad ran production services for Warner Brothers in the 90s and the 2000s. So he ran like the property department and the costume department, and all those internal services. And one of the internal services that they had on the lot was a flower shop. And, people go, well, why is there a flower shop, on the lot? So when AOL bought AOL Time Warner, and, the first of the big tech takeovers of a Hollywood studio, people forget, but that was the first one. My dad was telling me these stories about how one day in walked all the suits, right? With their Harvard MBAs, and started walking around the lot, asking questions. And of course, when they came up with their list of things to improve, because here we are showing all you stupid movie people how to make movies, the flower shop was one of the very first things that they wanted to cut. And they did, and the flower shop went away. And since then, Warner Brothers has been bought and sold 5 times. It's in a state of utter collapse. It can't make money to save its life, etc. And I want to make this odd argument that the flower shop is the reason why. So why is there a flower shop on a movie lot? Well, how many times do you think some young starlet showed up to work crying and freaked out because of a fight with her boyfriend? Right? Like, think that happens a lot. Do you think that there's a lot of times when an executive is maybe caught cheating, and it would be really great if like 5 dozen roses showed up at his house, in an hour?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if you think about like, okay, like we're used to thinking of like a corporate hierarchy, right? And that's the artificial piece. What it should be, and what I think Hollywood did reasonably well, is it should be an ecosystem, right? And so like if you think with tons of positive and negative feedback loops, with lots of communication up and down the hierarchies, lots of little self-controlling fiefdoms, etc., as opposed to the org chart from hell, right? With strict lines, etc., because it's the strict lines that keep the information from flowing and create these ridiculous outcomes that we're talking about. So like I would call the nukes buried underground with the chickens, that's actually like, I consider that to be fairly brilliant.
Yeah, no, you're right. A suit would come in and go, why do we have fucking chickens here? We're fighting the Soviets with advanced technology. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah. And then it does make sense for other things where, see, like, I guess my argument of like keeping the bureaucracy around, I look at it more of like I can't wrap my head around because I do the podcast and I made it, and obviously I'm the crazy person running it, but I could imagine of, let's say, instead of Vanderbilt, it's Carrigan. Yeah, if I inherited something that I had no interest in, it was Vanderbilt Steel. If I inherited something that was steel and I'm like 4th generation, I don't even really have an emotional attachment to it. Where it's like, well, Dad started this. It's like, no, the guy that started it is someone I never met, and then the grandpa died when I was 5, and all I know is my dad owned it, and I don't think you might not care about bureaucracy. You might be like, what, we still own 4% of the company. I'm still making 180 million a year and stuff. You might just be like, yeah, fuck off. Or I could strip the bureaucracy, which might not even work. And if it does work, best case scenario, if I pull off this thing that I am not at all equipped to do, maybe I get double. Maybe I get 360 million a year. But if I'm just some 4th generation bum, what do I care about 360 versus 180? Like, I'm still still partying it up, total shithead. I'm blowing the entire inheritance up my nose. I could see that working, which is just like, yeah, fuck it. What do I care? Oh, there's going to be a hostile takeover. Do I get a cut? I mean, what do I care?
Well, Tommy, depends on your time horizon, right? And the Vanderbilts are a very interesting case because, as I understand it, they are not a rich family anymore.
No, 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 no. That was possibly the worst name I could have
No, no,
used. It's
no,
just a,
no, but the best, right? The
all
best
right.
because it's that exact attitude that leads to the dissolution of, of
Yeah.
whatever it was that they had. Jeff Cooper, the guy who founded Gunsight, wrote a great book called To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth. And the title is taken from the old Persian nobility when a young prince kind of, was becoming like, I think, 7, 8, 9 years old. He would be sent out of the court to a rural, a friend of the king, a noble, to be fostered in his court. And he would be told, teach my son to ride, shoot straight, and speak the truth. It's like go grow up outside of the court where you're not, putting the Persian crown jewels up your nose or whatever the Persian, equivalent would have been.
Yeah.
And then come back and rule. And if you care about concentrating and maintaining that kind of capability over time, that's what you do. Because look, it's like look at the DoD right now, right? Like we have never spent more, and yet nothing works. And so at a certain point, yes, you can have these self-sustaining hierarchies. They can be moving through time, they can be hands off, they take on a life of their own. But back to that iron law of oligarchy, eventually they start spitting out really bad products. And like, as someone sitting now in the wreckage of Hollywood, which was once a thriving ecosystem
Mhm.
and is now a steaming wreck, someone should have stepped in and said, maybe we need to refocus on story and less on special effects, which I kind of blame for a big part of Hollywood's current problem is that when you didn't have CGI, you were limited. And that sounds terrible. I don't want to be limited in my tech storytelling. Well, those limitations actually bounded the notional space in which you had to work. And you had to be clever. So, like the classic case is Jaws. They had an animatronic shark that was supposed to feature very heavily in that movie. It didn't work. It sank on the first day. And so that's why Steven Spielberg had to do the Thin, and
Uh,
Williams comes in with the music, and it's it went from a slasher film, which is what it would have been if you had seen the shark, to a really good horror movie, which is what it is when you don't see the shark.
uh,
So I will take away your CGI and force you to tell better stories.
let me turn on the heater, but I got a point. Um, turn on the heater. Okay. Yeah, there's a guy I had on my show years ago, like a fusion researcher guy or whatever. He's a nuclear physicist and whatever. Um, and I made some joke about how like this is back in 2020. Like I made some joke about the Russians could never catch up or whatever. And he was like, yeah, no, the United States has always been technologically dominant. That's just our thing. He's like, the British are good with face-to-face intelligence. And he was like, the Soviets, because of the fact that they were limited by a lack of abundance, he said that they are the best like electrical engineers in the history of man. Because the running joke about like, oh, old Soviet technology is like, yeah, but because I know the meme is always like, so they build bigger. Like the Typhoon class submarine was so big because they couldn't make the SLBMs, the submarine launched ballistic missiles, smaller. So the Typhoon is like still twice as large as like the largest thing today. And the joke is like, yeah, Soviet engineering is shit, but he was like, yeah, but they still managed to like be a credible threat to us for 45 years, despite the fact that like most of the roads weren't paved and had like wooden wheels. They could still be a threat because they were forced to be like, all right, how do we do this? I mean, perfect example, dead hand. All right, we don't have all this sophisticated early warning lines in Canada and orbital shit and with the different satellite programs like Hotel and Corona and Keyhole. All right, what if we just set up like a tripwire essentially around the country that just measured seismic activity? And if anything ever happens over this much overpressure, which can't be occurred by any natural event, fire everything.
For everything,
And now we're sitting here going like, fuck. Like,
right?
yeah, so that limitation might be, and then I guess you could argue that limitation is what pushes you to become great, and then you become great, and then the people that inherit it no longer have the limitation, and they become sloppy and rinse and repeat.
Exactly. Yeah, the discipline to impose limitations, even when you can buy your way out of them, might be the determining factor of like long-term success versus not long-term success. You know,
Yeah,
it's the Soviet piece is really interesting. There is this great book that Collector's Armory put out on the history of the AK-47, like as a cultural artifact.
yeah,
And if you want to understand the Soviet mind versus the Cold War American mind, study the M16 and the AK-47
yeah.
as like cultural artifacts. And it's the decisions that the Russians made. That the Russians never had enough guns ever. Going back to like the 1800s, they bought guns from Winchester. They bought, tons of guns from us. They never industrialized very well. And so every time they went to war, and I think this is in the book, or not the book, the movie, about the sniper, Enemy at the Gate, where two Russian soldiers get off the truck. They hand one a rifle and one ammo because there's not enough guns for
Yeah,
everybody.
follow him, and when he
Right.
dies,
Follow,
yeah.
take the gun. So at the end of World War II, they basically said, we are never doing this ever again. And so everything about the AK-47 is, can we make more of them?
Can we just Happy Meal it?
Yeah, can we just make more? And so like there's a version of the AK-47 prototype that has like a really lovely thumb safety, right? Where a modern person would want a thumb safety. Well, you know what? That's two extra parts. So no,
Absolutely.
you can't do
Abs-
that, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, these cultural choices that you're forced to make, um, there's a permaculture principle. The more limitations on your design, the more beautiful your design has to be.
It's there's a great book called Firepower by Paul Lockhart, and I had him on here to talk about it. And it's just the history of guns. And I just choose like I just listen to random books on Audible, and then if I can get the author on, I'll have them. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this shit. Why did you have him on? He said
Good point.
yes. Why did you have him on? Like he said no. I don't. People are like, how did you get this person on? Well, I asked them, and then they said yes. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Um, but no, his whole thing, and I know next to nothing about guns. I have a couple. It's enough that I can, if someone comes in the door, I can shoot them. But like, his whole thing is kind of starting from like muskets, and then it's like the projection of power. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. It's better than a shield and a sword. But as it goes through, and it goes to like the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and it's all just all this old steampunk dog shit. But then when it gets to World War II, and I thought it was so fascinating because all of the Soviet stuff, it was not just a limitation on resources, but it was also the moving front, meaning like, okay, maybe they did have like the Soviets weren't completely backwards. Like they had an autonomous shuttle. Like they did land shit on the moon. Like they're clearly not backwards. But okay, their facilities for this like fine milling and stamping and stuff was probably back around, Moscow or St. Petersburg or whatever. But as the front was moving, their armories were like farmers' sheds. And so it came down to like, what can we essentially like beat into place? What
Yep.
does the average farmer have? Well, he has a winch. Okay. And then, if the military is moving through, they probably have some form of gunpowder that could be used as like a high heat, like torch. Okay. So then you have all these I don't know, weird derivative guns that were like, why did they have that? Like, what is the sharp edges? And they're like, well, we could just take like a sheet, you could rip like a sheet of metal off a tank and like stamp 10 of them and be like, now you have a gun. They're probably gonna fire.
Yep.
But then you look at the Soviets lost 27 million dudes. They're like, yeah, that was probably enough. That was probably enough. And like, that's how he talks about it. Like, people look back at this and they're like, oh, it's a brilliantly simple design. It's like, it was a paranoid. They had nothing.
Had nothing.
It was paranoid. It's how did you know to how did you know to hit the guy intruding your house with a thermos? I didn't have anything around, so I grabbed the thermos. Like, oh, it's. But I was gonna say about what you said about the never again thing. Curtis LeMay, the head of the U.S. Air Force, he led all the bomber formations in World War II. He's the guy that the general and Doctor Strangelove is based off of. Um, he talks about when they got into World War II, when we finally finished with the Lend-Lease thing, we're like, we got to get involved. Um, he was like, the rate at which we were losing planes and the rate at which we were getting new ones. He's like, you could do just the napkin math. In 30 days, we wouldn't have an Air Force. So this is like 42 or whatever. And he's like, and I will never forget that fear that eventually the US production, the monster awakened and then we made 1 trillion of them. But he's like, I will never forget that, which is why he kind of became like a meme because, but he was so, and he wasn't, upper management. He would lead the formations. He would be in the plane and be like, fucking, here we go. And that's what led to Strategic Air Command. That's what led to like Operation Chrome Dome. That's what led to the B-52, the XB-70. That's what led to the ICBM program. He was one of the guys that was like, yeah, bring the Nazis back. Like, fucking stop being pussies about it. Like, we need it because it was based off of what you said, that never again feeling.
That has to rewire your brain in a very profound way.
Yes.
You know, like it's probably, yeah,
Yeah, and I guess now that I'm kind of like saying, and then we're now talking about the DoD today. And it's like, no, it's the same one that LeMay was in. It's like, well, then how does it get to today? Well, I think the constraints are not there.
right. Well, okay. So have you done a deep dive into John Boyd yet?
Boyd.
John Boyd. Okay, you really need to dig into his work. He have you ever heard of the OODA loop? Observe, orient,
Yeah, yeah,
define.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's his.
All right.
So that's what he's mostly known for today. But he was also responsible.
I'm gonna make a note of it. How do you spell it?
Boyd, I think.
Boyd, John Boyd.
Boyd. Yeah, there's two biographies of him. They're both amazing.
Uda. Sorry, I'm just putting it in my search bar, so it's the first thing I see after this. All right.
So he was a fighter pilot in Korea, and our plane, and I forget which one it was. I think it was the F-86, was inferior to the Russian MiG that we were fighting, but we won, and we won a lot. And he figured out that it's because the pilot, in order to get the specs, the Soviets had a very low cockpit for aerodynamic reasons. We had a very high cockpit, and it cost us a lot of performance, but it let the pilot see a whole heck of a lot better. And so the ability to gather information, etc., got us to win. And John Boyd went on to, he's the guy who is responsible for the F-15, the F-16, the F-18, and the A-10 Warthog. Like every good plane we had was basically, they called themselves the fighter mafia. And they were in like a basement room of the Pentagon. And it's John Boyd and a young Donald Rumsfeld and a young Dick Cheney. They're all down there trying to create a fighting force against this push for ever more sophistication. And Boyd has this wonderful letter that he called the to do or to be speech, and you can look it up, it's online. But basically it's the iron law of oligarchy, where he says, look, you have a choice. You can be somebody in the Pentagon and you will get good assignments and people will know your name, or you can do something and no one will know your name. You'll have a shitty little office in the basement, but you might just be responsible for saving the country. And I think that inside of large organizations, those are very much the choices you have to make.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Then it's like, so then which one do I do? And it's like, are you trying to provide? And again, the banality, you can just be like, well, I'm just providing for, my wife and kids. But I don't know. I think, yeah, at that level, you probably do have something like that. It just keeps, how do you push back against the ever increasing sophistication? I think you're seeing it now, and I know nothing about warfare, so I should just shut up, but I won't. It's like, well, we're seeing it now, and like right? Just Ukraine. It's just the insane level of acceleration of drone technology,
Yep.
right? And it's versus, and you look back at like Nazi Germany, it's like they had all this crazy shit. The Messerschmitt 262, right? The first jet engine. They had some other thing, which was like a rocket plane interceptor and all this amazing stuff, but they had so few of them.
Yep.
And, even their tanks were better armor and everything. And there's some quote that I've said a million times, some World War II generals like, a single German tank could take on four American tanks at the same time. He's like, well, you guys obviously won the war. How'd you do it? He's like, oh, we just made sure we had five. Like, so it's just like that kind of simplicity of like, yeah, no, you can take down four. All right, just throw in another one. And that now, so we look at the Nazis, we're like, yeah, they had that kind of apex technology, but it didn't matter. We just swarmed them. That same thing's kind of happening now. If you just look at, we've got insanely sophisticated things, F-35, F-22, B-2.
Not enough of them.
Yeah, I don't think that's how, I think in a Cold War, it's very good posturing. You can, flex on them. They are terrifying. So you give them credit. Like you can pierce your air defenses. You won't know they're there. How long does that last in a hot war when like the gloves are off?
And how much maintenance does it take for every flight hour? And can you do that maintenance in a field where that plane had to land?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, there's like I'm from what little I do know is like the B2 basically requires like a security team around the clock. They don't want
and,
any espionage, no nothing.
and so does its logistics train,
Yeah. And
right?
it's like, is that like the president needing security? Yeah, no, but this has been flying since 89. Like how many resources are that? Even
Right.
on our own bases. Not
Absolutely.
any old grunt is allowed near them.
That was actually one of John Boyd's plans was so the F-16 was designed so like John Boyd didn't have any problem with highly advanced aircraft. Like he was behind the F-15, which is like still the best plane like that, flying it still holds most of your records, like
Yeah.
your actual performance records. But what he wanted what Nassim Taleb would call a barbell approach. So you have a small number of very expensive F-15s and you have a shit ton of cheap F-16s, right? And that's the piece that we've lost is
Yeah.
we have the exquisite bespoke technology over here, but guys, we also need a whole bunch of something cheap over here for just for numbers, and it's that piece of the equation that we've lost.
Yeah. Delta Force is like a great tip of this. They're the best of the best. They're the Michael Jordans of shooting people in the face. There's a limited number of them. You got to use them for, you probably in the opening shots of a war, you use them for key things. But then you just need to swarm them with just 100,000 18-year-old Marines cracked up on whatever fucking stimulants and belt-fed machine guns. That is how you win. Another thing, Eisenhower and Patton were like buddies after World War One, like before they were anybody. And after World War One, they were like, tanks are going to be the next big thing. And then like the bureaucracy of whatever, West Point or whatever institution they're at, they're pretty much like, don't do tanks. Like tanks are fake and gay. Like fuck off. You're not allowed to do this. And all the guys would always like sneak out at night and go to these bars nearby. There's a great book about it. I think it's just called Eisenhower. Um, they would all go to the bars and stuff, but Patton and Eisenhower would sneak out and go like mock war and like like what would you do if you had a tank? Like how would you go about this? And I forget like what the full story is, but I think they even like conscripted like fellow engineers to like start drawing up tanks and what they would look like so that they could develop their own tactics. And the higher ups were like, don't do that, and they still did it regardless. And it actually almost killed them. There was like an early version of the tank. It almost killed Eisenhower and Patton and changed like world history. It was like 1920. They're out one night, I guess just drunk as fuck. And one of the treads on a tank snapped and it flung towards them. And they were like a foot outside of its radius. But the tread was slicing trees in half. And they'd almost cut them in half. And I think Patton eventually said that that was the scariest moment of his life, not war. It was like drinking with Eisenhower when like a primitive tank almost killed them. But they went and did that, and then World War II started, and they essentially kind of whipped out this like operation, this like doctrinal operation. And they're like, no, we've been like working on this for like 20, 30 years. If it was ever found out, they probably would have been let go
Right.
or court-martialed or whatever. and it's like you can do something or be something. And these are these guys that were like, no, we're gonna have this action plan ready to go. Like fuck them. And then they're revered as General Patton and General Eisenhower. So I don't know. How do you thread the needle in all of this? Do something or be something. That sort of high agility, early corporation where the information, there's not many barriers. It's like, the CEO knows all the clients versus how it just balloons into something that's $1 trillion megalith. How do you thread the needle with any of that? Or is it not? Is it a rinse and repeat type thing?
Well, I mean, look, some of it is destiny, right? Like no World War II, we never hear Eisenhower or Patton's name, right? It's like those guys were not in charge at the beginning of World War II, right? All the people in charge at the beginning of World War II are people whose names you don't know because they were peacetime bureaucratic generals and admirals,
That's fair.
right? And so there was a select war created a selection event where, Patton and his people were the last men standing through pure just hardcore attrition and war. And so, it's and look, the same thing is happening in the media space right now, right? Like you are playing the role of an Eisenhower and a Patton. You're exploring a new media space, right? That's a Saturday morning, and you're talking to a retired prop master. Is that the right? That is not a good business plan from a
No,
traditional media point of view.
no, it's almost the worst.
Right? It's almost the worst possible thing you can do talking to me. But what if, as people look at these, all of these media systems that are all controlled by iron law of oligarchy that have these beautiful polished shows, but they're not authentic. And they know that they know that that they are being lied to by the more polished the show, the more you're being lied to is not a bad heuristic. And so, I don't claim that you and I are sitting here spewing the truth, but I do think we're looking for it,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I think Patton, and Eisenhower were doing. They didn't know if the tank was going to work, but if you ride enough tractors drunk at night, you probably have a real good idea what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah. 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 No, I think that's, yeah, the more polished it is, the greater chance it's dog shit.
Yeah.
And
And
I
that's why
don't,
Hollywood's dying. That's why media is dying, is because the better it looks, the worse it is. And that's been true for at least 10 years.
yeah, it's also, I'm realizing just how like, and I've talked about it nonstop, but just in 6 years of doing this show, I'm realizing how like truly the fog of war there is and like building your own thing. You look back, whatever, you founded Blockbuster or whatever, any, success story, and he now owns this. And it makes so much sense in hindsight, which obviously is like the dumbest statement ever. But it's like, well, of course there was going to be touch phones, and of course there was, but none of it's clear.
None of us.
Absolutely none of it's clear. And even if you don't do all right, so let's not be polished, let's just go after this, then it's just like, well, are you unique? Because why would anyone watch you? If you have nothing else to offer, there has to be a reason why anyone would watch. So like the audio sucks, it's echoing, the camera's dog shit. Why would anyone watch? And if you're covering the day-to-day news that everyone else is, you can go on YouTube or Rumble or Twitter or what, it's all the same things. It's a formula of like where every third letter or every third word is all capitalized, and and Trump slams the Dems, and like even if you think you're pursuing it truthfully, how many people are covering that topic? Well, now it's just like, do you stick out? And then it's also, okay, you have to be unique. You also can't be unique for unique sake. Well, I do my show very uniquely in that I don't wear pants. Like, well, that's sure, that's technically unique, but like, that's not a record you want. Like, he's the best, but he's hit that basketball player as his record's never going to change. Like, what is that? It's like the number of times you shit yourself on the court. Like, I don't, that's not what you want. Sure, it's a superlative by definition, but and I think that's kind of where I was going off earlier before you and I started recording was that's how I try to look at my show is when I find people that love it for what it is. And they're like, I haven't heard this type of conversation before, this style of conversation. To me, that's the diamond. Everything else can be polished in time. But if the core is there, if you can listen to this and be, oh, that's fascinating. Back to Mario, you don't care if it's Grand Theft Auto 10 in 8K, 240 FPS. If the game's dog shit, you don't care. If the game's great, you'll stick with it almost regardless if it doesn't get better, if it's just fun. Now, if you can take that fun thing and make it better, well, now you caught lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. And you're also giving your audience a ton of credit to fill in a lot of the blanks, right? And my fiance for Christmas this year really wanted a cathode ray television because she's a gamer and she wants to play N64 on the TV that she grew up with.
Yeah.
So we found one and we went out and bought it. And she went and hooked it up. And I went into her office like an hour later and she's sitting there watching. Oh, we also got a VHS player with it. It's an important part of the story. She's watching Lord of the Rings on VHS, like mesmerized, staring into the screen. And I sit down next to her and we watch the entire movie. And the resolution is absolute dog shit, right? It is awful. There's tracking lines, like, but it was warm,
Yeah.
right? Whereas
Yeah.
like modern TV, the cathode ray was red and warm, and modern screens are blue and cold.
Yeah.
And your brain just doesn't care that, oh, by the way, you're missing like, almost half of the overall picture because it's a square, it's not letterbox. It doesn't matter. And it's like, we have become so obsessed with this idea of make everything visually perfect. What you took away from your audience was their own imagination.
Mm. Yeah, I remember in like early 2000s, I was born in 1990 from New England. I don't really care about sports anymore, but I loved watching, probably because my dad did when we were little. But I always remember like watching the Red Sox or like the Patriots, like early Tom Brady. And we had this giant living room with like a 30-foot ceiling and this big flat screen. And then in the guest room, which is where my grandparents would always stay, we had this shitty little, probably CRT from like God knows when. I mean, it couldn't have this big, and the room was tiny. But dude, I never knew why or could rationalize why. I would always go into that room and watch it because it was just in this tiny little like bureau with closing wooden doors, and there was something about watching it that was just felt so like some of my best memories are like in that room, like staying up late in the summer with like my older brother and like watching King of the Hill at 2 in the morning. And it's a dog shit TV with horrible resolution, horrible audio. But man, you couldn't pull me away from it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to find and I guess it's also kind of like I get some, I don't even want to call it wisdom. I don't know what it is from playing games. And somebody commented on one of my videos that I wish it, like, I love your guests, I love the topics, but could you please stop using video games to discuss serious topics? And my answer to him in the comments is what it is now. Fuck off. But like, I've always found in games to just go after, treat it like a game, do whatever you like, and just become insanely good at one thing. And that's my like hyper fixation mind. But just become insanely good at one. I mean, literally one thing. Just, playing Hitman. I'm like, I can just shoot people from a distance. I think I used this example with you in EM before, but the game, the point of Hitman is to not get caught. It's to shoot nobody. It's to be an invisible CIA hitman. Literally, like the maps are like, you start like a distraction over here, and this person comes in there, and then the chef leaves, and then you dress up as a chef, and then you put cyanide in the food, and you feed it to the target, and the whole thing is about zero imprint. No one knows. I've never played it that way ever. I literally start the map and just start shooting, like hundreds of shots. Like if you kill one person, you get 5,000 XP off. You pretty much fail the mission. No lie, I average each mission probably negative 4 or 5 million. Like it's. I'm not even kidding. I'm actually the global leader but in the wrong way.
The
On
wrong way.
several maps, you can find like you have to literally scroll to the end page. It's like 100,000 pages because there's a huge community, and like I'm at the, it's like Tommy's podcast is at the very bottom, and I'm proud of that. My point is though, I've gotten so good with like the one weapon no one really is good with because you're not supposed to ever use it. I've like I've become incredible at it. And so when I finally decided to play the game like a month or two ago, I've been playing for 5 years. I went through it so quickly that then I turned the difficulty up to like veteran, expert, whatever. Dude, I ran through the game and the campaign in like 2 days, like perfect scored everything because I just shot the guy I needed to shoot, and that's all I could just do. It didn't. Nothing else mattered. I could just do that. I could hit him from across the map with a pistol that's supposed to be used for close range, and I've kind of used that most of my life. In college, like I knew I wasn't smarter than the other pre-med kids. I knew I could work harder, and I knew that from lifting weights. So I would just memorize hundreds of equations. I didn't need to be smarter. I kind of take that and apply it to the podcast. It's no, it's not going to be in the best resolution. Yes, you can see my like living room behind me. Yeah, I get up during the show to go piss and grab a blanket, and you can probably hear me farting and stuff. But I do believe the flow of the conversations. No, I believe I've had innumerable people tell me it's like the most engaging thing they've heard, and that's kind of where I come down on it. Is it's the CRT screen. I don't know where I was going with any of that, but
Oh, it's so your the hours that you put into that game changed your nervous system, right?
yeah,
So so I think it's really important for young men to engage in, like you said, a practice of mastery. Doesn't matter
yeah,
what it is.
yeah, yeah.
If you need to do your 10,000 or so hours in something, it honest to God doesn't matter what it is, because once you have something, um, other things become significantly easier, because there's a great book you ought to read. It's called The Talent Code. And it gets into like what muscle memory actually is. It's not necessarily muscle memory. What it is that your neurons in your body become better insulated with repeated motions.
Mm.
So what happens is that when your brain says do this precise motion, it's not that that signal is stronger. It's that that pathway is better insulated, so it becomes harder for you to do that thing wrong.
Oh.
And yeah, if you have one good myelinated pathway, if you have the practice of myelinating pathways, then whatever it is you choose to do is almost anything that you choose to do or change in your life involves remyelinating some type of neurological pathway. And so if you've done it once already, then you know the practice.
Yeah, no, and that's a very important thing. Is it's bigger than like could get good at a single talent in a game. Like no, no, no. It's not that. Doing it, period, in anything, that is the method. Is learning perfection.
Mhm.
Apply that to like I don't know if you've ever seen those like or I'm sure with well AI now is just horrifying and it's probably aware and it's probably gonna kill all of us soon. But like and like 10 years ago, you'd find like the simulations of you'd be like apparently one of the most like difficult things is making a bipedal organism walk, and
Okay.
they would do it with like the early polygon shit, it'd be like a ball, a cylinder, and like arms and legs, and like generation one, and it would just be like boom, like fall flat, and then be like generation 10, and it's doing like a toddler wiggle, and it's just the most basic neural nets. Generation 100, and it's like kind of walking and tripping. Generation 1,000, and it's like running and sprinting, and then it's like, and then you add barriers like a hurdle or like a door, and it goes back to just fucking up nonstop, and they just time lapse. Generation 10,107, and it jumps over the hurdle and opens the door, and then like dodges the bullet. But it was the same neural net. It was the same whatever algorithm. Nothing changed. You know, this code, and it just did it forever. That's how I describe working out. Like so I started in when I was 13 on my dad's Bowflex. What you learn from working out, the most basic, no pain, no gain. All right. The next thing, It sucks going into it, but you always feel better after it. The next thing, if you kind of build your biceps when you're 15, it's easier to talk to girls. It's that simple. It's just, yeah, sex drive. All right. You keep going. Oh, over years, it starts to take on an entirely new form. Oh, okay. Then you start to become more prideful in it and it starts to feel good. Oh, okay. Just that basic working through of I could never lift a 50-pound dumbbell. Right now I'm throwing it around, but I can't lift a 100. 5 years later, now I can throw it around. That microcosm is 100% how I got into medical school. It's 100% how I've grown the show to what it is today with the podcast. It's 100% this January, I'll be 2 years sober. This last year, I lost 49 pounds. All of those things. There's not some new advanced attack mode. It's the same algorithm of the bipedal polygon walking. And it's no pain, no gain, consistency. You're never going to want to go into it. It always feels like shit, but you're always going to be happy you did it. And then whatever goal on the horizon seems impossible, one day it will be easy, and then you'll be at the next one. That right there is like that's that's the only advice I'd ever give to anyone is just start working out. Everything else makes you can after that it's like yeah, you can go walk on the moon if you want.
Yeah. Well, it's you know, it's you've developed. This is a Brett Weinstein idea. You've developed a relationship with the unforgiving, right? And so I think that that is something very, very important, especially for young men. If you think about the idea of rites of passage in older cultures, you didn't just kind of float through life. You had these very hard, obvious points at which you stopped being a child, at which you started being a man, etc. And society gave those to you. And in one sense, they're very constraining, but they're also limits that define notional space, to go back to an earlier part of our conversation. And so one of your earliest rites of passage was some type of a relationship with the unforgiving, whether it's hunting the wolf at night in the cave or, whatever that might be. And yeah, after you do that, you have a different neurology, you're a different person, etc. And now, more importantly, you have access to that going forward. So yeah, if it's the gym, awesome. Like there's so many I forget his name. There's a guy out there that is putting his kid not through college, but through kind of like a alternative college system. He's sailing around the world, doing other stuff. And a lot of the stuff that he is doing is developing a relationship with the unforgiving. He's doing wireline firefighting. He's on a sailboat, right? Like there are tons of 35-year-old dudes walking around out there who they've never done anything where if they did it wrong, they might die.
Sure.
Right. And I would argue that is, a very important thing. And now, by the way, these people might all have PhDs,
Yeah.
right? Master's degrees and be sitting on top of, various bureaucratic hierarchies. Kind of goes back to Nassim Taleb's idea of skin in the game, and EM's idea of organic versus artificial status hierarchies. Part of what makes an organic status hierarchy organic is that all of the people in it have skin in the game, whereas in an artificial one, you don't. And so you play different games with different consequences.
And there is kind of no escaping it in that you can still see it on like YouTube or they recently started doing it on Patreon where they're trying to like make things happen. They're trying to like make a show happen. You can tell it's pretty obvious. Just log out of YouTube, just go in as a incognito and just see what gets pitched to you. And you can see which things are pitched to you, whatever podcast, whatever. And like I'm sure that works to a degree. I'm sure you can inflate shit, but it doesn't last and it's horseshit. And it's you can see the like and I hate it. It's like have you tried this podcast yet? It's like the only email notification I've ever got from Patreon. I'm like, what is it? It's the first young black woman empowerment. And I'm like, but what's the show about?
So about
If the show's fucking hilarious, let's do it. Is it the best thing ever? No, it's dog shit. and I don't want to listen to it. And you can like force these things. You can kind of just really bum rush them through, right? They don't really ever become anything that should be. And you can try to insulate yourself from it, but it always comes at the end of the day, it's like, what do you got? Like, can you show it? And I think that's been something that's kind of helped me with this podcast is, and the arc is long and it's much more about you can do or be. But on a long enough timeline, I think it, knock on wood, it's been a pretty long timeline already. I think that's what wins ultimately is to do something that no one else is doing. Like it does have to be novel. It does have to be unique. And it has to be developed in this weird kind of way versus again, like what you and I are doing right now. I've gone on to like big podcasts with whole teams and everything. And they'll ask you like 2 days before, like, do you have a list of questions? Here's the list of questions. We're going to do this. And I'm like, no, I just make it. I've had people that have come on the show that are like, what do you mean you just make it up? I'm like, oh, I don't know. They're like, what's the show about? I'm like, oh, I just let the fear of God take over. I start recording and then go, man, I have no idea what I'm talking to this four-star general about. And man, it's sink or swim. You sit up straight. You start to just every book you've ever read about, boom, and you're immediately trying to make an entire profile that fits this person. I don't think you can get away from it. Even steroids, you find guys at steroids, they find out a way to cycle steroids. I've been lifting weights for over 20 years. Some guys figure out steroids, and they don't kill themselves right away, but eventually they do, or they're covered in acne, or they get man tits, or they get the bloated stomach, or their face looks like it's a meatball. There is no way around it. And I think that's kind of what I'm learning through the podcast. Not that you asked, but that's kind of what I'm learning through the podcast. It's like, yeah, man, there's no way around it. It's just a long slog.
Steroids break your, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, you know more about it than me, but that what steroids really let you do is they let you recover faster, right? You know,
I,
and
I should know. I don't know.
okay, yeah. So as I understand it, steroids help you recover faster because they're immunosuppressants, and that's what they give you when you're having runaway immunological problems. And so it lets you work out more than you could otherwise. And it's like, okay, you just broke a feedback system that was trying to tell you something important. And what it's trying to tell you is you shouldn't be working out that much.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so there will be again, it has become artificial, right? You've put an artificial, you have broken a feedback cycle that would have normally stopped you with an artificial means. And like, yeah, there is, in my experience, there is almost always a price to pay. Now, you can choose to optimize for something, right? You can choose to be bigger, faster. And if that's your choice and that's your optimization, cool. But realize that it has a whole bunch of unforeseen, downstream consequences. This is another Brett and Heather Weinstein thing where it's impossible to be the fastest and the bluest. So you can really only choose to optimize for one thing. If you choose to try to optimize for two things, by definition, neither one will work. So the example is back to the F-15. The F-15 that set all of those incredible records had no paint.
I watched some of that the other day. They called it the Streak Eagle.
Yeah, right. And it's
Yeah.
this gorgeous
Oh, it looks
rainbowy, looks
incredible.
looks awesome. But if you had put 300 pounds of paint on it, it wouldn't, it would lose, right? So it can't, that F-15 can't be blue and the fastest. It's one or the other. You got to pick.
Do you know the early U2s? They painted them black and it brought the ceiling down like 10,000 feet. And the U2's entire thing is its ceiling.
Right.
It can barely fly. It's horrible to fly. It weighs like nothing. It doesn't even have it has one land or has no, it has one landing wheel or two, like a bicycle. It has to land and then come to a stay. They use poles with wheels under its wings when it takes off, and then it takes off and it drops the poles because the entire thing is just about shredding all weight.
Yep.
And then Kelly Johnson at the head of the Skunk Works, he was like, I want them black. I want them like black. And then they did it. And they're like, we can do it, man, but it's 10,000 feet shorter. And they're like, fuck, all right, just put it back up. Yeah, you can't do both.
And those things come at you in weird places where you think you're optimizing, and oh, I can optimize this too. And it's like you have no idea what you are going to fuck up when you change your optimization strategy. Well, like, but okay, it's a film studio. It's really good at making blockbuster movies. What if it also has a video game department and a music department and a media department and an internet department?
And then, yeah, then it's I don't know what your time constraints are. I don't know if you can keep going. I got pissed, but I have a couple more
Yeah,
topics I want to hit. All right.
sure.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, all right, I'll be right back.
I'm going to get more coffee. I'll be right back. Oh, okay. More coffee.
Oh yeah. Um, fuck, what was my point? I don't know. I guess we were talking about kind of the maximize one thing. Um, one thing that's kind of helped, and I've used it on as an example before on this show is the game Nuclear Option. It's a flight sim. You have bases and you're just nuking each other and whatever. Um, and early on in the game, I would find out like the best way to go about it was to not try to don't do any like doctrine, don't do anything. Like you could drop the bombs and they would just kind of bounce like BBs almost. And so the goal was to get the biggest bomber that carried the most. He carries 16 nukes. The fighter jets carry four. The other one carries two. The other one carries one. It would be to get and it would be to get really good at proximity flying, which is flying as close to the ground as you can. Which is again, it's kind of like shooting in Hitman. It's not something you're supposed to do. It's something I've always done on video games that have a flying component. 'Cause it's a rush when you're just flying 800 miles an hour and your altitude's 3 feet. Like it's fantastic. And then you die in the most horrific ways, but there is something fun about it. There is no reason to it. Grand Theft Auto 5 would always just be proximity flying. You're flying down a mountain in a 747, just cruising across the treetops because it's just fun and it's exhilarating. Having done that for like my whole life on any and all flying games, I got pretty good regardless of what the game is. Like I got to learn the exact mechanics, but I'm pretty good at it. What I didn't find until I started playing nuclear option was like, oh, that's how you're supposed to avoid radar. I didn't realize like that's why the B-1B bomber was designed to go low to the deck is because radar is it's everything you can see. So if you can go down and it breaks the radar contact. All right. So I was kind of good at that. And then I found that if you're flying up and you locked onto okay, lock onto this airbase, you lock on and you drop the laser guided nuke. The laser is also noticeable to the enemy. They can detect it and they can target it. If you don't if you don't laser guide it, if you just dumb drop it, you have a better chance of it hitting, but they can still fuck it up. They can still take them out. What I found kind of by accident was is completely unintuitive. It was flying as low as I could in a B-2 bomber. It wasn't a fighter jet. You're just like legitimately like 5 feet off the ground. And it would be to get as close to the bases as you could and then start dropping the bombs at an altitude of like 3 feet. And there was a like a 4 or 5 second delay on them. But the bombs they were invincible. That was just coded in to be like whatever. The bomb doesn't need it doesn't have impact forces like a plane. So you could drop them just like Johnny Appleseed. You could just drop 10, 15 of them. And these things are going like Mach 1. They're tumbling and hitting hills and bouncing in completely unpredictable shotgun approaches. Sure, then the C Rams and the SAM sites would start shooting some down, but all you needed was one. One would roll. And then with like a nuke, it's like we don't even have to be that close to your target. You know, you get within a mile, like, yeah, you're good. And then it would destroy it. And then that's how you would kind of punch through lines was this completely unconventional. And you have to save up money to level up in the games in each match. And then you unlock planes and you have production facilities. So that there actually are some constraints to make it kind of rare. And I would be doing this sometimes in online lobbies. They'd be like, "No, what the fuck is that guy doing?" Because I'd be in like the B-2 bomber, which is like half of our budget, and I'd be like, "Trust me," and they'd be like, "Can we escort you?" I'd be like, "No, I don't need it." And they're like, "What is he fucking doing?" Just people in chat like, "No," and because I would just be going like Mach 1 in a plane that's not supposed to go Mach 1. The entire thing's rattling and stuff, and like, but then I would do this approach, and then you would drop them, and these nukes would go off in a streak, and then we'd go up whatever like 90%, and that was awesome, and I loved doing that. And then they patched it, to where the
Because of
nukes.
you.
I don't know if it was but it might have been because I would just teach everyone that strat, and it would just be like you can do anything with this, just throw the rubber ball nukes. And they patched it to where you had to they would get destroyed if you dropped one. It'd be like the bomb was exploded by a 50G impact or something, and if you're doing it as fast as I was, it'd be like destroyed by 567 Gs. You'd be like, motherfucker. So you try to slow down as much as you could and like bank it as much as you could and like really slow it down like an air brake and then do like this like subtle, almost like finger roll thing. But even then, they were fragile. It'd be like broke at 10 Gs. You'd be like, motherfucker. And so I was like, all right, so you have to fly as high as you can. And then that didn't work. And I found two ways to do it. And this is the point I wanted to bring up to you as sort of like meta themes. The first is just brutality of war. So what you do is you get in the fighter jet, you strip everything off it, like the Streak Eagle, strip everything off of it, and you fly as fast as you can, as low as you can, as close as you can get to their target. Bank up, doesn't matter, you're gonna die anyway. Bank up, give yourself enough room, eject, you float down. And it takes like 10 minutes in game time for them to capture your pilot, and it doesn't even do anything. But if you leave the pilot there and you see his little like icon, it's like you have a downed pilot, and he just stands there, just some like like low poly thing. Okay, if that pilot is like I don't know, right behind a hill, and then the base is on the other side of the hill, you can now lock onto your pilot. And so what you do is you launch standoff nuclear cruise missiles from like 30 miles away at your pilot. and he doesn't know, and thank you for your service, but like he's just standing there, and they don't try to intercept it because they're like, hey, it's locked onto their own guy. This is a team kill. These things fly in, nuclear shockwave, and that's how you can do it. And it's like you sacrifice your own guy. Like, what do I care? Or if you're trying to do it in the ocean against their aircraft carriers, their sea rams are shooting. Best way to do it, man, is to send your own flotilla at it, and your flotilla has no idea. You then come fly in behind your flotilla, so they can't see you, and then you nuke your own flotilla. Brutal way to win the war. But I found like that as these constraints were added, you had to find more and more fucked up ways to win. But nonetheless, I'm able to win. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Just completely unconventional, nothing. And here's the other thing, and I'll make this point, sorry. Everything I just told you, okay, you now know. If I'm playing on a match with people who've never seen this, not only do they get mad and like kick me, but it takes like an hour to reach that point. So everything I'm doing where I'm like, don't, you have a limited number of nuclear weapons. I'm like, don't use the nukes. Don't use the B 2 bomber. Take our valuable aircraft carriers, throw them all at this one target. Nothing else matters. People are like, we're not doing that. And I'm like, you have to trust me. And then eventually somebody sees it and they're like, that's genius. And then they start to trust you. But not only does the thing work, you sound like a madman trying to pitch it. And you have to be like, trust me. Just trust me. For 45 minutes, go against every instinct you have. And they don't want to do it. But if you do it, you can win 10 out of 10 times.
I, I think that, like the, so okay, so this is an Eric Weinstein idea. Where do we put our crazy disagreeable men, geniuses? Right? Like once upon a time, that's what the Harvard mathematics department and physics department was for. They were
Yeah.
a place for, that's what Caltech was for. And I love this joke because I grew up kind of not too far from Caltech. It's like, how to tell the difference between an introverted and an extroverted person at Caltech. The introverted person is staring at their shoes, and the extroverted one is staring at your shoes.
Just all autistic scientists.
Yeah, they're all autistic scientists. But you needed to create places for these type, like disagreeable genius men don't work well in bureaucracies, right? Particularly in female dominated bureaucracies. And so we kind of recognized this at the end of World War II, and we built places for them to hide out. And are you familiar with the Jasons?
Yeah. I actually had on one of these like 90. I had on one of the
That's
Jasons. Yeah, there's the precursor to ARPA.
right. And so just the recognition that, okay, these people are rather special and we should probably put them in a place where they're not going to hurt themselves or others and come up with really amazing stuff for the rest of us. And all of those places are gone,
Yeah.
right? They've all been subsumed by the bureaucracy, by the longhouse, whatever it is you want to call it. And so those guys had a really important job, which was to speak the truth when everyone else was afraid to, because they were so autistic, they didn't care about the social consequences of saying that the
Yeah,
emperor.
what social life? Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. What's social? You're not going to invite me to a party I didn't even want to go. Right. And so it's like the guy who's going to say that that's a stupid plan to the four-star general, the guy who's going to tell you your beautiful airplane is ugly and stupid. Right. Like those guys are really, really important. And like you said, in relation to the game, that person sounds like a madman the entire time. Like from
Like
the
fucking
origin
insane.
of from the origin of the idea, that person is crazy. It is, and what's the it's crazy is just a word we give to the right answer that we haven't all agreed on yet. There's a quote, something like that.
There's another one I love. If you're one step ahead, you're a genius. If you're two steps ahead, you're
Right.
crazy. And then the
Right.
difference between genius and crazy is profit margin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's so look, and then so this is a Silicon Valley saying that actually proves our point, right? There's a word for being too early. That word is wrong. if if you're coming at it from a profit perspective, if you're coming at it from a longer term civilizational survival perspective, if you're, you do need those guys who are seeing, because if you're too far ahead, you're not profitable, right? You're really, really not. I had this idea of how to be able to buy any product on any TV show or movie, and I pitched it all over the place. No one got it. 10 years ahead of its time. You can't make money too far ahead, but you might just save your civilization. And so there should be places where those types of ideas are incubated. And I'm going to argue that one of the major problems we face right now is that we have gotten rid of all of those places through DEI, through various other mechanisms. And one other point, are you familiar with Herfentoffel?
No.
Okay, so Herfentoffel is Viking chess. And the thing that's interesting about it is that it is, to the best of my knowledge, one of the very, very few asymmetric games that existed in the ancient world. So there's a group of kings, there's a group of ogres. The kings are trying to get to the edge of the map, the ogres are trying to stop you. Both sides have radically different goals with radically different rule sets. And if you this is another John Boyd idea. People ask John Boyd, hey, if you were made the Secretary of Defense, what's the first thing you would do? And he said the first thing I would do would be to ban the Army Navy football game.
Oh yeah, you said this with the
Yeah.
EM, yeah.
Right. And it's like, why on earth are we training our future strategic warfighters to play the same game on the same field with the same ball by the same rules and fight it out over inches? Isn't that the opposite of what we should be training them to do? And so in Herfentoffel, because it's asymmetric, that's kind of where the genius of the gameplay is. And Tommy, back to your whole point, I took us all the way here to go back to your game. You figured out a way how to take that game and have an asymmetric outcome.
I think in the Pentagon's Brain by Annie Jacobson, yeah, I think it might have been John von Neumann, where they did have these groups of guys where like their job was every whatever, it's probably a fat paycheck in 1945 or 46, but it was like we'll give you $20 a day. You just write, you put down your daydream thoughts on paper.
Right.
And these are like the guys in Jason's and then ARPA and then DARPA. A lot of it was like whatever your thought is, like go for it. Just
Yep.
whatever you're thinking. And I would like to, because from whatever I understand, it's the most classified shit ever. But from what I understand, that is what sets DARPA apart, is they don't let it grow past like 100 official employees, and they remove project managers like with every it's like you develop stealth, that's awesome, you're out,
Yep.
because they don't want any calcification. Like
Yep.
stealth was a genius thing, but now you are always going to be biased towards that one thing. You got to get out of here. And the next thing is like, all right, internet and like siloing information. Hey, great idea. You got to get out now. All of
Right.
these things. I mean, even the early missile defense, we had this idea. It's called like there's L something, I think. Um, One of the early missile defense ideas we had was to launch nuclear weapons on the East Coast, West Coast, and center of the United States into high orbit and have them detonate every like 6 minutes, just forever. Because it created this insane shield of electrons that would fry. Not only would it fry like the guidance systems, but I think they would also made the fissile material almost inert. So even if you could get something through, you just have dirty bombs, which would suck, but in comparison to thermonuclear war. But the idea was like we're gonna do this, and they're like, well, I think eventually they're like, that's kind of fucked. I don't know if we can do that. But like that was the idea they wanted, and then they threw him out. And the next thing was like SDI and all this stuff, and no calcification. I hope that's what DARPA still is. And again,
Me
there's
too.
no way we'll ever know. But that's got to be because you do have to have that. Like, how would you beat this with nothing? How would you play this game? And not with existing technology. And then I guess the cool thing about DARPA is that's also the tip of the spear. So if you do come up with something, they're not worried about profitability. They're like, oh, we'll contract this out. So what they do is it's like 1 out of 10 programs work allegedly. And then what they do is then they feed those off to the it's like so you have different corporations like I think Boeing has Phantom Works, Lockheed Martin has Skunk Works, Raytheon has something. So you have these defense contractors, and then they all have their top, their eggheads at the very top in these special labs. DARPA is allegedly above that, and so they'll hand it off to like the tier 2 autistic scientists.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe there's like maybe it's good for incentive or morale where it's like, hey, if your thing works, we'll actually build it. Doesn't need to be profitable. Like we'll build it. It doesn't matter. Um, I would imagine that's going. I hope it's going on.
Well, it certainly used to go on. I hope it still is. But like, if you can get him, you should talk to Eric Weinstein because this is kind of his hobby horse, which
I've,
is
I've tried to get them both on so many times.
all right.
I'll keep
I just,
trying, but do you
yeah,
have
keep.
contact with him?
I don't.
I
I
thought you were
don't.
about to say I could, and I was like, oh,
I wonder if I know someone who does. Let me think about it. I like his kind of theory, and Eric, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but like, and I'm going to do this kind of humorously, but his overall contention is that physics got too dangerous after World War II, and that's why we stopped doing it, right? And so if you have, you have nukes, and then you get, thermonuclear weapons. And like you can't run a physics department at a super high level in the 50s and 60s without some bright young kid rediscovering something really dangerous, right? And so Eric's kind of contention is that if you were a bright young kid in 1955 and you accidentally discovered the right way to do the casing for a fission bomb, you would show it to your professor, and your professor would go, "That's very interesting. Come meet with me on Sunday." And you come into the office on Sunday, and there's a man in black in
with
there
two
who,
FBI
yeah,
agents.
who would, but no, no, not. It could be that, but it could also be that one of the
You're gonna
Jasons
come work for us
to
now.
go. Congratulations, you passed the test. Come work for us, and they go to Sandia or Lawrence Livermore or wherever they go. And like in the 50s and 60s, everyone understood that system, right? You had the professor who knew it. He knew who to call. There was a space for you. There was probably empty labs waiting for the next kid who figured this shit out. Roll the clock forward into the 90s, and all the original guys are dead. And
Mm.
have we forgotten that that's what and then we invent string theory as a red herring to burn up all, like it basically has been a scam for
A
the last.
graveyard, yeah.
Yeah, it's a graveyard for people, relatively smart people to go and burn up their life energy. And so, did we forget that that's the system we built? And that's kind of Eric's idea, is that Harvard forgot what Harvard was. Harvard isn't a DEI factory. Harvard was a silent partner in the military industrial complex whose job it was to get those brains, nurture them, and then put them the places that they needed to be. And if all of a sudden that autist dude who said that really uncomfortable thing at the Christmas party, like once upon a time he would have ended up at the Jasons, and now he's unemployed, right? And it's like, that is to me, like when we talk about the military industrial complex, it's like I wish we had the military industrial complex of the 70s, 80s, 90s. Do we still have it? I don't know, because like you said, like at that level it's really opaque. But judging by the state of all of its supporting institutions, I don't think so. If I look at it from like a tracking point of view, I don't, you can't destroy Harvard and Yale and those places. You can't have what we just went through over the last 10 years. You think about how silent the institutions were during COVID, right? Where were all of the disagreeable men? Well, they were all on podcasts, right? Like there wasn't the head of the Harvard mathematics department, and I don't even know his name, I'm just speaking in generalities, didn't come out and say this is statistical bullshit. I'm not an epidemiologist, but none of this math is real, right? Like that's the kind of thing you would have expected if we had healthy institutions. And like after COVID, I just don't think the institutions are healthy enough to support the military industrial complex that you and I wish that we had. That's a guess. I
Yeah,
have
no, I mean,
no inside info.
no, if you were to just completely zoom out, you could say that this is a negative feedback system of decay. That's why COVID happened, and that's why there's just outright fraud with like the COVID loan or the PPP loans, and that is, on a maybe it's not visible now, but give it a couple more decades, and we'll look back and go, oh, that was the beginning of the end of the American Empire, and even that is like a very delayed feedback system on, well, you got rid of the freaks, the freak autists, and this,
Yep.
and because it's a country and not a person, it's turning a cruise ship. It takes decades, but this might be a natural feedback system of unintended consequences. And then that's why China or Russia rises, is because right now they have freaks that are doing things that won't bear fruit until 2060. And by then it will be obvious. So this might be, we might you might be right. Like we're in this. I hope we're not. Um, I did see something the other, like the X-37B is like the autonomous space shuttle. It's been around since like 2009. And it does just crazy shit. I mean, it's some of the Space Force released like its orbit the other day. Dude, it's like almost at the moon. And it's like it's a self-landing mini shuttle with a payload bay. And I did see somebody saying like, so we've been teasing like the F-47 fighter, which is like it's going to be the replacement for the F-22, and it's been called a lot of names over the last 5, 10 years. PCA, penetrating counter air, NGAD, next generation air dominance, all these different things. But in general, it's just the replacement for the F-22. And then there's all this hubbub about Russian and Chinese fifth generation fighters, and are they actually sixth generation? And then after that thing was posted about the X-37, because it took a picture of like Earth and it's so far away. Somebody was like, "Yeah, I don't think the F-47's our thing." It's like we're releasing a sixth generation. Russia and China are releasing fifth generations that they're trying to dress up as sixth generations. But man, we got this like autonomous fighter jet on the moon. So I do have little hopes that the
Right?
freaks are still out there,
God,
like
I hope so. I
like
really do.
cooking shit up. Um, And that's also one thing I can, and I'm again, if this podcast is anything, it's me talking about things that I have zero education on. But I kind of have a theory that's what, hold on, excuse me. I kind of have a theory that that's what Bitcoin is, intentionally or unintentionally, would be, you put that out there because it's the ultimate honeypot to where, so like, let's say, just allegedly, let's say the NSA cracked quantum computing, whatever, 20 years ago or 10 or whatever, or some form of AGI or whatever, which none of these I don't think are absurd assumptions. If you just look at any classified military technology and how it's always decades ahead, why would this be any different? They have faster planes, higher planes, bigger bombs, better technology. Why would it not be this? It just, to me, I think ChatGPT was probably around in like the mid 2000s in DARPA.
Yeah. Whether it's true or not, you should assume that it's true.
Yeah, why wouldn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
just as like a cursory like examination of patterns, you'd be like, well, probably. What you would want to do is you'd want to detect if other people had it, right? And other countries, if they were smart, would keep it very quiet. That's why we had the satellite system. I think it was called Hotel, and it detected specifically the double flash of a thermonuclear weapon. So we could tell when anyone tested anything. We didn't have to go get air samples, which is something that the early U2 and SR-71 were actually capable of, was shooting these like darts, I don't know, like that big, like into the ground in like the middle of nowhere Russia, and they had sensors, and then they
Oh,
would beam it back. So like first we had to do air detection, and then we had these darts that, I mean, in like the 60s we were dropping these darts from like 50 miles up and just being like, yeah, there's some strontium 90 in the air. Like just I'm just in love, and like
what about the poor farmer that found that in his field and didn't know what he was looking at?
it's probably executed.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's but like so it's all about detecting, right? So and then it's like before and then after we did that work, we didn't even need air samples. We can just detect this one little like gamma ray burst that doesn't even happen naturally in the universe. And then, okay, so it's all about detection. Doesn't matter what anyone says. You don't need satellite photos. There's only one thing that makes that flash. There's nothing else. Not even supernovas or not even hypernovas. Well, you would want to detect if anyone was getting close to quantum supremacy, if you already had it or were knocking on the door. And you could, if they were smart, they wouldn't take the bait at other honeypots because they probably have their own autistic freaks that are like, America might be baiting us to see what we have.
So when someone cracks Satoshi's wallet, you know they
Well,
haven't
what
won
other way to do it than just promise untold riches?
untold riches.
I think that's how you do it. And it might not even be that that was the if that was the plan, it's the greatest thing ever.
That's a long
But it
play.
might
Like,
not even be the plan.
bravo.
It might be an emergent phenomenon where we go, all right, we figured out how to crack this in this lab. We're not gonna fucking don't touch it. Don't touch it. There's a much bigger worth here. We want to see if someone else can crack it.
Okay, so there was this
I'll put the
article.
crack pipe down now.
No, okay, so there was this article that I read years ago. There was a computer researcher who discovered a security vulnerability, and I'm not a computer scientist. Deep, 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 like in the architecture of the early Intel chips, like on a fundamental hardware level, there was this flaw. And it had been built into the chips for like 20 years. This flaw had just been sitting there. And so he calls up the powers that be, whether it was the NSA or whoever, and they say, "Hey, oh my God, I just found this thing." And they said, "You're the third person to tell us about this in the last couple of months."
Motherfucker.
Right. And so from a metaphysical point of view, why can something be undiscovered for 20 years and then it's discovered all at once by a bunch of people? How can calculus be invented by two different people at the same time, who don't know each other? There have been a lot of these instances throughout time where, it's time for calculus when it's calculus time, right? All of the other needs and demands and discoveries and thoughts have all happened. So the pump is primed, and like as technological development and thought and theorizing goes, like there needs to be calculus, and so there's calculus, right? And so I have to wonder, back to our idea of like the military industrial complex, and yes, we probably already have quantum computing. Did the NSA discover that vulnerability first because they were looking for it? And the very act of discovering it is what made it discoverable by other people. And that's a metaphysical statement, not a physical statement. But like, you have to wonder, you're doing all of this work. There are people who know about it. Those people are keeping the secret, but it's informing other things that they do.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so it's like it's not even that like anyone's letting the secret out. It's the fact that now that this thing exists, it's altering behaviors and thought processes in ways that are just impossible to measure.
Well, that's the very idea of like this, not quite the very idea. That one's a little more metaphysical, but I like it. It's like the 0-day exploit, right? How you find a way to hack a system, and I don't know if you've ever heard of 0-day exploits, where it's you find it's called 0-day because it means the enemy has 0 days to prepare for it. So you find some exploit in Facebook or Bank of America, and you find this thing that you go, if this was used right now, no one even knows it exists. You can do a lot of damage, and they might be able to. A big corporation might be able to patch it up in a couple of days, but by then you might make hundreds of millions on whatever. And then it goes to weapon systems, and it goes to hacking. So there's a black market for 0-day exploits, to where yeah, hey, I found this thing that you can hack into whatever Instagram live. People then buy the 0-day exploits, and then there's a lot of like hypothesis where it's like it's probably Instagram has their feelers out there. None of it's in a memo. And it's this, but then like the real fucking hot topic ones, those are the military ones, where it's like, hey, you're gonna sell this to us and you're gonna do very well. if you don't, you're not making it out of this room kind of thing. It's like, all right, okay, here's the zero day exploit to the, whatever, the B2 bomber. But it's the idea of like once they figure it out, it can happen. They're like, well, it's a matter of time until someone else. The fact that we know it can happen means someone else might be doing it. What you're getting in is on like a deeper level. Like, does the meta mind of mankind? It's like as the water of like consciousness starts to boil, bubbles start to pop up everywhere. And if one bubble pops up, the very act that like bubbles are not happening, you're like the water's hot enough. And that could be calculus needs to be real. So when you find it, do you immediately start going, there's something beyond the physical veil that we don't entirely understand, but there is something is going to be pushing out and it's going to pop up in brains around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't forget that Newton was significantly more proud of his alchemical work than anything he did in mathematics or physics.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Newton died with more writings on alchemy than he did on physics. What we now call physics. But yeah, he was a hardcore alchemist, as were all of his friends. Which is a different way of looking at the world, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I'm trying to it will never not be just the most alluring like tit for tat spy game shit ever. I feel like it's gotta still be going on. We just wouldn't, which is also it's also kind of like a logical cop out to be like, well, it's so classified, you'll never know. It's like, well, that's a very easy way to say like, what it's almost kind of like no true Scotsman type thing. It's like, well, that can't be it. There was another thought I was trying to get to. Oh, and this is kind of another example that back to like the nuclear option type thing is I think I might have told you this before. I've used it so many times and I don't care. I'll continue to use it. Is Far Cry 5. It's there's like a hyper Christian ultra nationalist cult out in Montana, and for whatever, and like they take over this entire state, and and you're the lone federal agent in there, and you're trying to overthrow it, and whatever. It's a whole video game. You level up and make allies and get the weapons, and okay, and because I'm retarded and don't know how to fixate on more than one thing at a time. I found that the easiest way to make money was you have to travel between things, and I found a place where you can sell animal pelts for almost no money, but it's really easy to get them. You find a wolf and you shoot the wolf. All right, you sell it. Okay. Versus all these other things, there are like these natural limits to be like you could go do all of the side missions in this town, and let's say the most you can make from that is $1,000. So there are kind of these natural limits on. You're not supposed to get certain weapons till other parts in the story. You're supposed to ace combat. Like you don't unlock the F-22 until the last mission, and the reason is because once you do unlock it, you go back and replay the campaign. You're just clubbing baby seals the entire which is great and I love it, but like that's the point of the game and the plot and the whatever. And me being me was like, I don't want to do this. I kind of just want to play games. It was like right when I started the podcast, I would just turn my brain off at night and vegetate. And then I found this like, and then I was like, all right, well then how can you attract wolves? And it was like, okay, all the carnivores have pelts that are more valuable than the herbivores. So you can sell like a bird's feathers and get some, or a deer. But if you get the carnivores, they're worth like twice as much. It's like, all right. And I was like, all right, well then how do you attract them? And it's like, you got to buy bait. And I was like, or if you kill a cow and their pelt's worth nothing and their meat's worth nothing. But if you then take the meat and throw it down, doesn't matter where you are on the map. Just look away because if you're looking at it, it won't spawn. Just look away and look back, and then there's a wolf. All
Yeah.
right, so now the what?
The people who designed this game didn't intend for you to become a wolf farmer.
So right, so all right, so now the limiting variable. So now it's like now the pistons start moving, and I didn't even realize this till after I've been doing it for a while. I just kind of all of a sudden it's almost like you can almost imagine like the dendrites of the neurons starting to touch, and it's like, hold on, and it was like, well, now the limiting factor is where can I get cows? All right, there's a lot of farms, but then I have to transfer it from the cow. I have to kill the cows, and then you can only carry, I think, 5 pelts at a time. Okay. So then you gotta go to a place where you can sell them. And there's only one spot in the map where there's a guy at the roadside stand that buys pelts next to a farm, just across the street. Okay. So I would start going and shooting cow, massacring them. And all you have to do is then look away and the cows will respawn. Throw down the meat, and then the animals come. Okay. Now the limiting reagent becomes ammunition. And you're also spending money on ammunition. So that's now a business cost. Okay, well if you start lining them up with a 50 cal, well now you can get like four deer at once or four cows at once, back and forth and back. Okay, well now that you're selling it, now you're starting to make it, or again, it's like you really shouldn't be able to make more than like $1,000 as a new player. Well, now you're making like 40, 50 grand a day. And mind you, you have to do this for hours. So you have to be a loser like I was, 30 years old living above my parents' garage. Like, but if you keep doing that, now you start leveling up weapons. So now you can start putting silencers on your stuff so the cows don't run. So it starts accelerating. And then if you get it, and then by accident, I accidentally took the bow one time instead of the gun. Well, the bow does even less damage, which makes the pelt twice as valuable. Oh, and then there's some random perk where if you buy this bag, you can carry twice as much stuff. Oh, so it starts compounding. Now you're making like 100 grand a day, like 200 grand a day. And I would just do this. Dude, I'm not kidding. I don't know if like 40, 50, never once advancing the campaign past 1%. Just making legitimately to the point where had like, I think the most you could make in the game off side missions is probably like 50 or 60 grand. I'd have like 30 million in the bank. Okay, so then it's like, well then, okay, so now what? Where's the limiting factor of that? Well, if you had a lot of money, you could buy a helicopter. And it doesn't make sense in the game, but the helicopter has four salvos of unguided rockets. So it shoots like 10, gotta wait 10 seconds, shoots another 10, and then you gotta go land it and get more rockets. And they'll bang you out for $1,000. And I think this is where the microtransactions come in, or you could buy money, silver bars in the game through the Steam store. Or you could, rob you blind for $1,000. Magically, your rockets would come back. Well, I've got tens of millions in the bank in a game that you're really not supposed to make more than like 40 grand. So with like 1% completion, nothing leveled up, no characters unlocked, no nothing, I would stockpile so much money. And then in one evening, I would take the helicopter. And the entire game, really, there's some plot, but at its core, it's just you're just liberating bases. You kill all the bad guys. In one evening, I would go on like a 2-hour sortie and go from 1% completion to 100% because the game is not built. There's no AA. The entire thing is like you're out shooting. The entire thing is like it's preppers out in the wilderness, and I'm flying around in a fucking like Delta Force helicopter, just raining hell that I got from selling pelts, from murdering cows, and then would beat the game in a single evening. And I always look back to that. And when I explain it, people think I'm crazy, and I am. I don't think it's unique to that game. I think that exists in life. I think that method exists in life. Now, I haven't figured it out yet for the podcast, but I think that exists. So all these different ways to just, and again, if I'm trying to pitch that to someone as it's happening, they're gonna be, you fucking, what are you doing? Go play the game. Why do you keep killing cows? Why are you killing thousands of cows a day? What are you doing? Like, are you okay? Like, how are things at home? Like, what are you doing? And that's how I beat the game. And what I imagine would be, I've never even checked it, but I would imagine would be like a record. So thanks for listening, sitting through that.
So Tommy, on just like a very fundamental level, what was your game? Was it liberating all the bases, or was it killing cows and getting pelts? Like I would argue that you really kind of have to separate out
Well, it's cow killing simulator. I call it that. It's not Far Cry.
Yeah, right. And so
cow killer.
yeah, and okay, and so like on just a practical level, the reason that doesn't work your business plan has faults in the real world because you're going to run out of cows or wolves or someone will buy wolf pelts, right?
Yeah.
And So real life has just way, way, way more feedback loops. And all of these things have been tried, right? Someone was the first guy to saturate the market with wolf pelts,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
first guy who went, what do you mean no one wants to buy one? Someone's always bought one, right?
Yeah.
And so the real life has already iterated,
Patched all those
patched all
updates.
of those easy things. And so then the question becomes, and back to an EM idea, the difference between, I think that the inorganic status hierarchy, the artificial status hierarchy, they've figured out exactly what you're saying, right? They figured out the bullshit way, the non it's not real profits, it's not real wealth, but they have found the money printing machine within their artificial hierarchy. The problem is that if you are trying to do what you're saying in a organic status hierarchy, in the real world, absent the iron law of oligarchy, absent all of the corruption, etc., it's about a million times harder.
Oh yeah.
That's why they created the inorganic status hierarchies, because real wealth creation is actually really hard, because people have found so many, you know, have already patched the system so many times. But what if you can create an artificial system that maybe has a government monopoly or whatever? And it's like, yep, it's really good to be the American Red Cross and own blood. It's a license to print money. People come in, they give us their precious bodily fluids, to go back to
Strange love.
Strangelove, and they don't ask us anything for it. We have to give them a cookie,
Yeah.
and now we own blood. It's like, what an interesting business model, right? It's so yeah, there are people. Look, the American Red Cross is harvesting wolf pelts. They're just getting it from
Yeah,
us.
yeah. Yeah. No, no, no. Yeah. No, I'm very aware of like the limitations of like this is a game. It's not a perfect emulator of reality. But in general, it's like a theme in terms of like different games and finding these unconventional ways to beat the game. Like
Yeah,
that meta
that idea,
theme,
yes, is correct.
approaching things from a yeah, I'm aware there's no like, well, I just photocopy models. Yeah, somebody tried that. Yeah, they're in jail. Oh, yeah, I'm aware of that. But what I've learned from games being Hitman or Nuclear Option or Far Cry is to go about it in a unconventional, untried way. And then so then you can zoom out even more and be like, well, then how do you do that? Right? You're just continually stepping back.
Well, I think you're doing it, right? I mean, you are exploring a notional space with your podcast, right? And you are talking to people who normally don't get spoken to. You are asking questions that don't normally get asked. You are, you know, like I forget, it was, this might be a Peter Thiel thing in Zero to One, where he said that like every billion-dollar idea started out as something that everyone thought was crazy and stupid, otherwise it would have already been picked up,
Hmm.
kind of by definition. But the problem is that, back to an earlier part of our conversation, it looks crazy,
Yeah.
right? And so what you're doing looks crazy. As time goes on, it looks less and less and less crazy. And it's such an interesting, like, okay, so I have been trying to, on a similar quest to you, to figuring out the world for, a long time. And like, you are actually like second or third generation young male podcaster doing this. Like, there were guys who, after the great financial crisis in 2008, who had like a 5-year podcast, and all of those guys, they all followed the same arc, and I listened to them all. It was like Two Beers with Steve. There were a lot of these guys who, like, oh my God, the world doesn't work the way that I thought it does. Let's start talking to people and let's start trying to figure this out. And everyone ends up in the same places. Federal Reserve, right? It's like, go down your list of conspiracy theories that aren't really conspiracy theories, and all of a sudden you're kind of like, everyone filled that notional space. And then they all stopped doing the podcast, because really they had explored the Overton window as it existed at that time. Well, now COVID happens. COVID blew that Overton window open in a way that was not the case in 2008. And now you're here exploring a much larger Overton window, of ideas. And, like, EM comes immediately to mind. Like, I don't know what that guy is channeling, but he is creating an Overton window space that I've never seen before.
Hmm.
And you are finding those guys. And I think that that has just tremendous value because kind of like by definition, and this is kind of a Jordan Peterson idea. He talks about this where you have the knights searching for the Holy Grail, right? And you don't know where it is and you don't know what it looks like, but you're on a quest to go find it. So how do you start a quest like that? Well, every knight has to enter the dark forest in the place it seems darkest to him, because the thing you most need is where you least want to look,
Hmm.
right? And so you are talking to people that the average person, legacy media, etc., would never go talk to that person, right? But you are. And so like that's the space you have entered the dark forest in a place that seemed really, really dark. And you're on a hero's journey. The hero's journey is to venture out into
Joseph
the
Campbell, yeah.
yep, slay the dragon and bring back the thing of great wealth that's going to revitalize. Or if you want to do the Horus thing, your job is to take your own eye and give it to your father so that he can see again, et cetera, et cetera, right? There's lots of different ways that this has been described. And strangely enough, in our time and our place, it's a podcast.
Hmm. And the yeah, it's Alan Watts would say this. Of course, the secret is the place. You see, when you look for your car keys, it's by definition, it's in the last place you thought of looking, right? It's it's
Right? Yeah,
it's you keep checking the drawer. You're like, how many times am I going to check the drawer in the backpack? If it was there, I would have found it.
that would
It's
have found it.
well, why would I check under the carpet in the living room? I don't know, but
No,
you lost it. A thing you don't normally lose. It's gonna right. Um, but I've thought a lot about like, so what is the driving? So again, in hindsight, I can talk about like, right, the the profitability of like slaughtering cows, or the point in like the counterintuitive winning mode of Johnny Appleseeding your most valuable nuclear weapons in a game where you get a limited amount in you're using a stealth bomber not to fly a stealth bomber, but you're flying it like an F-16 at treetop level. Like, why are you doing this? Well, we can say why. It's like it's a novel approach. But what led to that? What led to that novel approach? By that definition, you could say, all right, well, maybe the way to succeed at podcasting is to take this chapstick and just, I don't know, tap my window. Well, that's as much, you have as much heads up on how to make the thing succeed in the unconventional way as anything. So you go, well, why would I ever do that? Why would I do that for more than three taps? Why would I not? What would lead to me doing something for hundreds of hours with no intention of like, I'm going to find a way to beat this, just to do it? And it comes down to, well, it was fun.
it was fun.
And so that's how I approach a lot of things. I go, is it fun? And whenever I play a video, I'll never go online and find a walkthrough. I'll never go on Reddit because I don't want to know that. I want to find it out in my own way in these absurd, laughable. And again, for what reason do I make money? No, it's funny. To me, it's funny. Like there's something funny about seeing a B-2 bomber that's not supposed to go faster than the speed of sound going Mach 2 through the people are like, what the fuck is this thing? And even the game, like, or just nonstop. It's like, well, why are you killing cows? Are you a psychopath? Did you just want to like abuse animals? No. So what it really was is I'd started the podcast like a year prior. I was still living at home with my parents. I was working at a liquor store. I fucking hated my life, and I was doing the podcast. And I felt like such a loser that when I played video games at night, I was like, I can't play video games. Like I'm going nowhere fast. And so to me, the way I squared it in my head was I would mute the game and then listen to audiobooks. So at least I got something out of my day to day. It was because a lot of things you do every day, it's zero sum. You make your bed and then it's messy, and then it doesn't go anywhere. But I was like, if I listen to audiobooks, at least I'm gaining some knowledge about it. It's the bare minimum of like be productive. And I would do that every night. And I think it also made my parents think I was like less of a bum. So instead of me playing video games at 30 years old, it'd be like I'd be listening to a history of the NSA or whatever. And the only way you can do that and play a video game is like you cannot go play an in-depth video game that requires all of your focus. You have to find something simple. Throwing a ball at a wall. You can just throw a ball at a wall and just bounce. Grant that you can just drive around, and that's how you're reading about whatever FDR's childhood. And that's the only reason I did that. Now it became like a weird thing where the game jumped out of the game. Because then I started going, well, wait, why don't I just start interviewing these authors? So then I started interviewing these authors, and they'd be like, you know my book upside down and backwards. And because I'll listen to it 4 times in a row. And how was I able to listen to a 12-hour book 4 times in a row? And I didn't have to. It wasn't a school project. Well, I was having so much fun just shooting cows. So then these like the weird universes started to overlap. So it's like, yes, they've patched the shooting cows thing in real life. But even now, I'm doing a podcast where I will make some amount of money on this episode, probably like $5. But now I'm gonna get at least a new subscriber. I normally get like 5 new subscribers per episode. So now the whole cows thing actually is real though, because the number of subscribers I get is directly correlated to the amount of money I get. The amount of money I get is the amount I can put into savings. And the amount of savings I have insulates me from the ebbs and flows of YouTube and Spotify to where I can keep doing this show. Well, why do you have to insulate yourself from the ebbs and flows of Spotify? Well, because I'm not doing a highly glossy produced thing. I'm not talking about AOC's tits. I'm just doing this show and I can talk to anybody about anything I want because it's fun and it doesn't need to be profitable because I've squirreled away enough money that I can just do what I want to do. I have no intention of like, well, how did the Donnie Bruno shows perform? No, I just texted you yesterday. I was like, let's do a show. So in a weird way, like they haven't patched it because I'm using that in a show I'm doing now. That's going to make me money. That's going to further insulate me from being worried about whether or not YouTube bans me. All right, they ban me. All right, well, I still got enough for rent for the next year. I'll keep doing the show. Then I do unique and novel shows, and then people find the shows and go, that's so unique. No one ever does anything like that. I'm like, well, it's not profitable for the first 6 years. So, did they patch it?
Well, okay, so they patched what they could see and what they knew about, and what you're doing though is novel. The patch doesn't yet exist.
Yeah.
Now they're trying, right? When you say that if you go in incognito mode into YouTube and they're showing you the highly polished
Yeah.
podcast, they're trying to patch that hole. I
Yeah.
think that post COVID, the podcast space scared the ever living shit out of, the powers that be because it was this incredible communication channel, etc. I think that podcasts have undone the entire Edward Bernays public relations model of how things work. And, I think as much as we're trying to explore notional space, the powers that be are desperately trying to do the same thing. And yeah, I don't know this to be true, but I've heard it. I've heard that one of the guys that runs Netflix is Bernays' relative. So Sigmund Freud, Bernays, Netflix.
Yeah.
I find that to be somewhat interesting,
That's
and
not concerning.
that's not concerning at all. It's yeah, Netflix buying Warner Brothers kind of breaks my heart. I have family history at that studio, and you know, no, no good is going to come of that. For as a fan of movies, right? As a fan of good TV shows, it's sad to watch kind of the what's happened to our storytelling capability, but without a forest fire, there's not new shoots, right? Maybe Hollywood needs to die, Tommy, so that you get your audience that makes you who you might be in the future. And if that's what happens, then I salute the death of Warner Brothers Studios.
Well, we'll wrap it up with like a final kind of anecdote, and it's so the levels of nuclear option, right? And then it's well now they've it used to be that you had infinite nukes, and now they limited that. So now you can't even do the whole shoot all the nuclear cruise missiles at your own parachuted guy because that might not work. And now you actually have enrichment facilities. So now there's a game mechanism by which you make nukes, and people can bomb that. So they're really like fucking my gameplay. They really want it to just be a traditional and fuck them. And so, and it's a great game, but even this is like, why am I doing it? Because I think it's funny. And so I finally found a way to like, and it's no, it doesn't violate anything. It's so the ceiling of the game of for the air breathing engines work is 15,000 meters. So, 15 kilometers, everything's in kilometers in the game. And that's about as high as you can go. And if you dive bomb, you can drop nukes, and they're going pretty fast, but they can still lock onto them because they have all the advanced radar and everything. And I was like, how do I get something going like hypersonic? How do I get something going like Mach? 'Cause, hypersonic's Mach 5. ICBMs, the MIRVs, the multiple independent reentry vehicles, they come in around Mach 23, right? And so it doesn't really matter if you detect them. By the time you detect them, they're moving so fast. So I started this last year where I was like, okay. So I went in and I took like in the mission editor, we can like build runways. There was no thing where like the runway needs to actually be attached to the ground. It doesn't fall. It just you can just put it in the air. And I used to not know that, so I used to build up these giant structures with runways, just so you'd have a little more. You'd have some altitude, even just 1,000 feet, so you can jump off, get some extra potential energy to kinetic energy. And then I realized you didn't need to do that, so I was like, all right, so I'd push it as high as you can, and it maxes out at like 15,000. And okay, well, if the ceiling of like the runway is 15,000, and then you put a hangar on top of it, well, the hangar also has a ceiling of 15,000. So now the roof of the hangar is under the runway. All right, that doesn't work. And so I was just trying to find out, like, well, how can I just like get the hangar a little bit higher? And I eventually did. And then I realized that sorry. So I was like, I need to get the hangar higher. And so I went in and was like, how do I do this? And ironically enough, there's something called JSON, and it's JSON though. And I guess it's like a file editor. And mind you, I have no background and I can barely use Microsoft Excel. I'm not like hacker man. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I barely know how to use a keyboard. Like I have no. And so I went in and it was okay. So you can just go in and all right. Well, I just instead of 15,000, I just need the hangar to have a ceiling of 15,005. I just need it to be a little higher so that I could actually take off from it. And I was like, oh. And then one time I think I put in like 16,000 by accident, and like the hangar was like, a mile above it. And I was like, so then I went into the JSON found, and if you go into the mission editor, you can't put anything higher than 15,000. And if you do, the second you click on it, it immediately goes back to 15,000. It just like freezes. So I went in and was like, I'm gonna just add a zero. All right, so 150,000 kilometers up, which is about where the space station is 220 miles. So I was like, all right, well, I was like, I started looking up. I was like, yeah, where do ICBMs begin their terminal phase? Like 500 miles, whatever that is, like 700 kilometers. I just went in 700 kilometers. Oh, the runway's up there. Opens up. You're like, let's go. Um, you can't take off of that. There's no, you full throttle, but there's no oxygen. So you're just sitting up there quietly. Nothing's happening. I was like, fuck. Um, and mind you, so sorry. The point I'm saying it now, the runways. This is you're allowed to build your own air bases. For a while, you couldn't even build your own air base. You could build an air base, but it wasn't part of the game. You couldn't spawn there, but you could go land there, which is great. Okay. The only movable air base was an aircraft carrier. Okay. So I get spawned an aircraft carrier on a platform 500 miles up. All right. So the elevator bring you get to the deck. Can't move though. There's no oxygen. The engines aren't grabbing onto anything. It's like, okay, so I made two platforms and I put it at an angle. Aircraft carrier balancing at an angle. Elevator lifts you up. Oh, and you start moving. Go off the ramp. Oh my God, here we are. And you can't even see you can barely see the earth. You're flying towards it. You can get up to around Mach 50. And then you can lock on a thing. You don't need to worry about shit because they can't detect it into the ceiling of the game, which is like 15 kilometers. And by the time they detect it, it doesn't matter what you have. It's coming in at Mach 50. you could just nuke everything. And so I started building orbital aircraft carriers and base all over the map, and I would just play with people, and no one would know where it was coming from. And I was just able to carpet nuke anything I wanted whenever I wanted. Didn't wasn't breaking any rules with the bombs. They weren't indestructible. Doesn't matter. I'm using the limited amount of nukes. I'm not buying any more nukes. I'm not doing anything. And that's how I beat that game. So I think at like the upper limit of like autistic is you almost have to step outside the game itself and start fucking with it. Now they haven't patched it yet, but I know it's coming. And I'll update you whenever the next thing comes and I'll find a way to beat it. But I wanted to tell you that because again, it's like, why did I do this? It was just fun. It was just cat and mouse. It was fuck these develop. I love the game. I'm just like, fuck them. No, fuck them. I'm allowed. I just will do anything to not. I don't even know why. I'll just do anything to not play the game the way you're supposed to. Take off from a one runway and bomb it. I don't know why. I just, to me, I'm like, I'm only having fun if I'm using nukes in a way that they're not supposed to be used. So I don't know, man.
So do you love the game, or do you love the game that you create
I
that you
think I like the
create
game I've
outside?
created.
Yeah.
It's a great game, but it's a game.
Yeah.
I've played it a million times. I go back to it. I'll 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 put in 100 hours and then I'll just stop and I'll wait till it's patched up and I'll go back into it and be like, fuck. Had it. The game's fun, whatever. No better than any other game. I love that I can push back and then I can upload the map to the community. Other people play it. And I think that's how it ends up getting patched is thousands of people start doing what I'm doing. They start streaming it and people are like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, yeah, I spawned into this map and I was on an aircraft carrier on the moon. Like, what? And I'm like, yeah, no, that's the way you're supposed to do it. So I think that's a good question. I think I love the game that I've made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've seen that YouTube video of the girl that's like the kid's toy with where you put the different shaped blocks through the little slots. And it's like, okay, where does the square one go? That's right in the square. And then they
Yeah.
put the other shape into the square
They
because
just put a
you can make it fit.
yeah. No, but that's what it is. And like, yeah, I don't know. It's I just I get a kick out of it, I guess. I don't know. And it's so I guess it could come down to like it's like is the game impossible? Is it a frustrating game? Like, no. Is Far Cry an impossible game? No, it's a shooter, it's a first person shooter. Like why go so far out of your way and take such a long amount of time and kill like a country worth of cows? Like why do that? Like is the reward that much better? Like you will do anything to play the game without playing the game. And I'm just now realizing as I'm talking with you right now, well, why do I like that? Well, I look at like what this show, I make next to fucking nothing. I'm 35, no wife, no kids. The show maybe makes like 36 grand a year, like poverty level. It's like, well, how was it hard to build this? I'd say I can pass a lie detector when I say it's harder to build a profitable podcast than it is to get into medical school because I've done both. But then what do you, and how much would you be making as a doctor? I don't know, 400 or 500 grand, and it probably would already be making that for about a decade now. Why are you doing this? I guess I'll do anything to play the game without having to play the game. And what is having to play the game? To me, at the most basic level, is going to a job I don't want to go to and having a boss.
Well, that's a bad game, right? The game of, let's call it being doctor, isn't the game that they say that it is, right? Like what the your experience, your gameplay of being a doctor in the real world sucks. You can only spend a few minutes with each patient. You spend most of your time doing billing. You have to buy, let's play malpractice insurance level, right? Like that level sucks. Huge parts of actually being a doctor in today's world, the gameplay sucks. And so you're looking for better gameplay.
But not only that is I look at it in totality. I just the idea of having to go to a job no matter what the job is. Forget doctor. There's something about that I've just always hated more than anything in the world. And I don't even say that's like a good quality. There's nothing I hate more than going to work. And I will do so much work to not go to work. I don't.
Well, because most modern jobs, to extrapolate from what I just said about doctors, most jobs today are bad games,
Mm.
right? Yeah, let's play the HR game. Let's play it's like, God, these games all suck. Let's all play filing your TPS reports every Friday. Let's all play, you know, Secret Santa at the office with people you don't like. Let's play, I did really good work. I'm the only member of my team that actually did anything game, right? Like all of these games suck. That's in fact, goes back to our earlier discussion. Within a organization that is trapped within like the iron law of oligarchy, there are no good games to play there. Back to do or to be. The only games you are being offered are to be somebody, not to do something. In our entire society, it's a stack of shitty games.
And then it's like, well, then why did people in the past decades, like my grandparents' generation, why did they play?
Because the game was better then.
What I was going to say is,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
you still worked at the Ford plant, and I doubt it was your passion, but you made enough to buy a house and have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. It was a
absolutely.
reasonable game.
It was a reasonable game, and we filmed Transformers 3 in Detroit because we needed a place that looked like a bunch of robots had just trashed it. And spent a
True.
lot of time wandering around parts of Detroit that a white boy shouldn't have been wandering around. And, these neighborhoods that were just abandoned. And like, it's a perfectly reasonable small suburban home with a boat that had, on a trailer, tires flat, covered in leaves. And you're like, huh, once upon a time, you could work at the Ford plant and have a house, I'm assuming a couple of cars and a boat, right? Like that means that you had a life someplace else where you did
Yeah.
both stuff. And yeah, it was a better game. And I think that, when you think about like the Strauss Howe 80-year cycle, etc., I think the game starts out pretty good and it gets shittier as time goes on. And the thing that literally breaks the cycle and whether that's like you take a winter analogy or a forest fire analogy, when everyone decides that the game sucks, that's when we flip the board over, metaphorically or realistically speaking, whether that's a war or whatever, and we say let's all make a new game. And I think we are living through this liminal period where we all know the game sucks, but the board has yet to be flipped over. And the world will be a very different place when that happens. There will be new people in charge. We will believe different things post board flip than we believe right now
Mm.
in a very, very, very fundamental way. And, you know, I remember reading about how when the Soviet Union collapsed, something like 10 million men drank themselves to death over a fairly short period of time. Um, it was a lot. Don't quote me on the 10 million number, but it was in the millions. And they were all middle-aged men because if you were young, you didn't have a huge investment in the system, you didn't have a lot of skin in the game, you could adapt, you could start selling Coca-Cola on street corners, you could go work for an oligarch, you could put on your tracksuit and do whatever. If you were 60 or older, you got to keep your house, right, or your apartment, and maybe there was a pension, maybe you had a garden, right, you were okay. It was the middle-aged guys who had already invested years and years and years into a system that now that system's gone and you didn't invest enough in the old system to be okay.
Mm.
Right. And so it's an interesting thing being, I'll say our age because we're within 10 years of each other in this particular period of time because the old games suck. The new games are forming, but not yet There's not yet a podcast microeconomy where you can have a very comfortable living. Maybe someday there will be. And so, yeah, we're in this period where the old games suck, the new games aren't yet fully formed, and it's a liminal space and it sucks. It just does, right? It just sucks. And it's okay that it sucks. And I think that if you are outside of the old system and you're treading water, you're doing amazing. You can't judge your success on where your parents were at your age, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, no, that they were literally playing a different game.
Yeah. No, I do try to like square that away. I'm like, I do pay all my bills just by talking to people.
That's pretty cool.
I'm like, that's kind of cool. Like right now I'm at work. Like this is work.
Hmm.
I just put in my 8 hours.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Well,
like
it's value creation. You're creating something valuable here, right? Like, don't even think about it as work. Like, it's not, it's like the bad job connotation. This is something else. What you're doing is closer to art than it is to work.
when I say this is work, no, I don't, perhaps I should use a different word. No, no, no. I look at it, I'm like, the fact that I've got to a point where I can take this and essentially spit it into the internet and then a dollar bill comes out.
Hmm.
To me, that's alchemy.
Yep.
And it's the most proud achievement of it. It's so much harder than getting into med school. I feel like it's alchemy. I've like I can talk about killing cows with you, and that somehow results in US dollars. That is, I am so proud of that. I feel like I'm in DARPA. I like figure out how to like, yeah, it's the coolest thing ever. Um, yeah, well, yeah, let's wrap this up. How long have we been going? Good Lord, we've been going 2.5 hours.
Something like that. Yeah.
God
Hey,
damn, son.
good talk.
That was awesome. That was fun as hell. Hell yeah, man.
That's why we play the game because it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, how did you do that? I don't know. We just made it up.
Yeah.
We literally just made it up for 2.5 hours.
Dude, that's the hard thing to realize as you become an adult is that everything has always been made up,
Yeah,
right?
there's no, yeah.
Yeah, there are no adults who know what's going on. There was just a bunch of people who made it up as they went along, and some of them got luckier than others, and some of them figured out how to do alchemy.
Yeah, yeah. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
no adults, man.
None. All right, dude. Well, yo, let's wrap this thing up. Thank you
Later.
for your time. I'll send
Oh,
this to you when it's up. It'll be up later today. And till next time, bro.
cool. Later. Have a good
All right,
weekend.
man. You too, man. Thank you so much. Hey guys, real quick, you guys know Basil Baz, ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. I just did a fundraiser with them the other day, and I'm going to put this on to every episode I do. They are special forces veterans who physically rescue trafficked children. They have since 1993. They have a 100% success rate. They do not take salaries. They all have day jobs, and they literally rescue sex trafficked children. Donations to them are a tax write-off. I get nothing from them, and they have not asked me to put this on. I've included this little clip on episodes for the last year or so, and I'm just re-recording it because I just got to meet him just 2 days ago for future. It's November 25th, 2025, but this will be on every episode now for the next year. And there is nothing better you can do with your money. If you can support them for even $5, please do that. It is, they truly are doing the Lord's work, and I think we all have an obligation to do that. Thank you so much.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, Our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a blue room soon. www.blueroom.com.
Hey guys, a huge sponsor of the show is Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. Clayton lives down in Georgia. He's been on the show before. It's actually nearby where I went to college. They are a huge sponsor of the show. They give me some money every month, even when I don't sell enough to warrant that paycheck. Meaning that the show is not free. It's just that it's free for you. If you guys need prepper food, or if you're just interested in supporting the show, I'd please ask you to go to the link in the description. Go to Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, promo code TPC for 10% off. 72 servings per pail, 25-year shelf life. These things are, they double as dumbbells. Pasta Primavera, cheesy potato soup, mac and cheese, loaded baked potato casserole, chili mac, cheddar broccoli soup, cheesy lasagna, teriyaki rice. You can get banana chips. There's also raspberries, strawberries, and apples. There's a bunch of freeze-dried fruit, or you can even get seeds to plant your own garden. It's not a bad thing to have. It's like gold or ammunition. It's a good thing to have. It's a bad thing if you have to use it, but it's good. It's good to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. So that's what I'd say. And if you just want to support the show, please go to the link in the description. Please go support them because they support me. Thank you so much, guys.